Guys, we're back. Season 2, episode 4, titled Woe's Hollow. What do you do? Go. Luke, let's start with you. What'd you think of the episode? We'll talk about the actual thoughts on the episode, and then it seems kind of like we should just go sequential with this episode. There's no innies versus outies,
Mhm.
really no major character buckets. Let's do it.
Well, there's
Yeah,
technically innies versus outies physically, but anyway,
yeah,
the
true, true,
for the
true.
4 episodes, I was just looking at IMDb before we jumped on here, and it's interesting to see that each episode has gotten higher ranks on IMDb. So, like, this is the highest. It's sitting at a 9.2. It looks like it'll probably settle around a 9 out of 10, which queuing into my opinion on this episode, I guess it's a little bit hot takey where I don't think that this was my favorite episode, but I still think it was great. Just felt like a necessary glue to the rest of the season that we're going to be going forward with, like all the reintegration stuff. I just feel like in my heart of hearts that the momentum from the end of episode 3 was not delivered on. And
Right.
that could be because of the week gap, and it could look better on a binge. But like, come on, you go from the Who, and then it's just like we just drop reintegration for the whole episode. I get that it's a process, and that is a little bit new information, so we can talk about that. But this whole episode was revolving around the twist that it was Helena, not Helly, which I feel like that
Right.
wasn't really a twist, like
Right. Right.
like the reason I was even confused about that off of episode 1 was because I thought it was so obvious off the rip that I didn't think they would take that route. But it's fine. Like, I'm sure some people this blew their mind. But flowers all around to Irving as someone who's cemented himself into the top 5. There's no way he might be top 3. And if he is somebody that's also in the process of going through reintegration, which we can talk about, him combined is definitely a top 3 character. He was such a badass this episode. So I have so many thoughts, but overall, like, it was a good episode. There's probably more than meets the eye for what we're actually physically seeing, but we'll save some of those for theory talk later. Paul, what did you think?
I agree with your aspect about episodes three's ending and then the momentum going in. I think right now it kind of stinks because we want to know the direct aftermath of what just happened with Mark, but they kind of
Right.
threw us right into this. I think it'll pay off. I think they're going to give us the direct aftermath, and it honestly gives some discussion points for this episode. Like, the discussion is Mark reintegrated this whole time, and we can get into that, but I think it'll pay off in the end. But I agree, interesting way of storytelling to do it like this, but I loved it at the same time. I mean, we talked about every episode, it's actually her Audi, Helly, that is. uh, But the way it transpired and the way that Irving was able to deduce it, I was still like shocked. I said out loud, like,
Mhm.
"Oh my God, like, what is going on?"
Yeah.
So I loved it. I still think it was one of the best episodes, even though, like, not a whole lot happened, but at the same time, it changes everything. So excited for, I think this is the most I'm excited for the next episode.
Yeah, I agree with both of you guys. I was very, very surprised. It was a little jarring to have the episode start with Irving just boom, smack dab in the middle of the
Mhm.
snow. We're not really getting the exact direct aftermath that we were expecting with Mark reintegrating. I think that's something we all have to realize is our expectations. We talked about the fact that, oh my goodness, episode 3 Mark's reintegrated. How crazy is this show going to get? And we're talking about All Rise, baby. We just have to realize, too, that this was episode 4 out of 10, and they
Yeah.
can't always be ridiculous jaw dropping episodes, meaning answers are given, right?
Mhm.
So I think, like you said, Paul, when you're saying not a lot happened, it's more of like it was like a narrative kind of episode and not really major answers just being thrown in our face. But there is a lot of things we need to talk about for theories, for certain hints that were given. And I just want to give Britt Lower some major, major props because I want to give Kathleen a shout. She was talking outside of the podcast. And if anyone on the core or listener of the core doesn't know Kathleen, she's a Bingetown TV member that she will be doing a lot for our Dark and Twisted podcast with Yellow Jacket. She's currently doing that with me for Dexter. She's working on Unreal Traders. A lot going on for Kathleen. You'll see her on the core soon enough. But she was saying that she thought as the episode's going that she's thinking it's a slam dunk that this is Hallie. She's halfway through the episode and she's like doing, wow, this is a little bit weird. Like Helena is doing very well at acting as Helly if this isn't Helly. Now, I want to bring up the fact that I'm going to do a little devil's advocate on Kathleen. And I'm giving Britt Lower her props majorly because as I'm watching this episode, I honestly thought that it was like Britt Lower acting as Helena, who is acting as Helly, but not perfectly doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was showing to me. Like, yes, it seems more Helly-ish majorly than she has in episodes 1, 2, and 3. 1, 2, and 3 definitely had scenarios where you were like, this doesn't seem like Helly at all. And this episode, there were times like when she's laughing at the campfire and obviously the bang to the bang to bang stuff and all that, where you're like, okay, is this Helly? But then there's other things where she was kind of cruel to Irv, and when she had certain ways of acting just throughout the episodes where you're like, this is kind of Helly light.
Mm-hmm.
And that's props to Britt Lower because she literally has to understand who Helena is, who Helly R is, and who Helena playing Helly R is. So major props to
Tricked
her.
Kathleen's ass.
What'd you say?
Tricked Kathleen's ass.
She tricked Kathleen, and that's the point. That's very good. But like you said, Luke, we've been talking about this theory since episode 1, so it's not a huge revelation to us.
Mhm.
We were trying our hardest to make it not be obvious, and we wanted it to be Helly R and blackmail and all this stuff. But
Mhm.
I am on your side, Luke. I felt like it was so obvious that could be a plot line that we wanted it not to be. I do want to bring up something Dan Erickson said, and he actually recently said after this episode that this has been a twist that they've had in mind since they were creating the show and writing season 1. They said that it would always be very interesting when they were writing in the overtime contingency, what would happen if they did it vice versa, and who would make the most sense for to do it with. And of course, Helena/Helly made the most sense to them, and they decided to go for it. And just like Mark's reintegration in episode 3 being this major reveal endgame kind of stuff that we thought was going to happen way later, the Helly versus Helly R versus Helena stuff, I am very happy that if they want this to be a reveal, they do it now and not later.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And there's 2 things I want to bring up before we jump into the episode, and this will actually make our episode talk quicker because these are big points, but I want us to have these up front here. The first thing being, is Helly pregnant? Like, is that a thing that I'm seeing everywhere? Anytime any 2 characters sleep together on any show, like that's should be your first thought. My question to you guys is, do you think the plan was for Helly to get pregnant through Helena or through Lumen, if that is what ends up happening? Like, is this something that she wanted for her personal self? Because we can already tell she has like this intimacy weirdness about her. So like, is this whole ruse of her going through and playing Mark's little side character in this episode, is that the end goal, or does she truly just want intimacy? I'm sorry. So that would be like her wanting intimacy and wanting this for herself as a person, or is this a Lumen plan? Because that could be more of a grand conspiracy like plot thing there, if it is like Lumen wants her to do this.
Yeah, so I want to bring up something really quick, and then that's going to kind of answer your question. And I saw a lot of talk on Discord about, is this being done on purpose from Helena and the Lumen side of things? Is it them targeting Mark because he's special and they want to make some kind of connection with Mark and Helena, Mark and Lumen? And I saw this theory online. It's not my theory at all. I was thinking about it, but as this episode's going on, but I definitely didn't like fully write this theory out myself. But there's people on Reddit that are thinking that Dieter Eagan is a real character. Obviously, we'll get into the Appendix 4 and all that kind of stuff and how much of it is fake, which plenty of it probably is, and how much is real, meaning it's even an actual person in real life. Is he actually Kier's brother? And people were theorizing that Dieter Eagan has lineage with Mark S, and Mark S is actually an Eagan. And they're trying to specifically have Helena and Mark commingle and have a baby to make the next heir.
Oh my God, that just blew my mind.
Yeah. And then you're having a scenario where they purposely set up Gemma's death because Mark was living a normal life and he had a wife already, and they take her out of the equation, for lack of a better term. And now there's a scenario where Mark decides, with or without being manipulated into it, to join the severed floor. And oh wait, now he's in love with Helly R and just banged with Helena.
That is crazy. Wow.
Yeah, I love that. That like connects so many dots and makes a lot of sense. Put that one in the back of your mind, and
Yeah.
that might be leaned on pretty heavy for when I form theories for next
Yeah,
things
and
because
also that's a good mailbag. If anybody has anything else to add to that, we will probably bring that back up for the midweek mailbag episode because wow, I need some time to think about that one.
And I wish I could have wrote down the actual username. It was a few different threads that I was kind of mixing into one theory of myself. So if if anybody on the Discord sees the usernames, write them down, put them in. I'll give them the shout on the mailbag. Like I said, it was multiple threads that I was using to kind of make my own one theory here. So I do want to give props when it can be found, though. So I should have wrote them down.
Oh, good. That was incredible. I'm happy you brought that up now. Okay, so that's enough of the Helena talk. Let's just jump into the episode. And this was that second thing I wanted to talk about, which is going to cue us right into the beginning, which is everything to do with Irving this episode, because it's
Yes.
very popular dialogue right now that is he also going through the reintegration himself, whether it was the forced reintegration where he's doing this whole coffee thing that he's been doing for a season and a half, or if he's the one that specifically got the Ragabi practice in between PD and now, where he could be the one that's also going through the same exact thing Mark is. And one of the things I want to bring up is, have we ever seen any Irving curse? Because he curses a lot this episode, including right here when he wakes up on the ice. He's like, I'm on the fucking ice. And I just feel like that alone might be some personality crossover of his military self on the
Yes.
outside. So I think that's what's going on here because he flipped. This felt the least any Irving since, like, this feels like a whole different character than what we went through in season one. And you guys can comment on that, and then let's just open it up all the way through them getting back together and watching the Milchick video. So just like the intro part of this National Forest of Kier, whatever they call it, Dieter Eagan National Forest.
last episode, I was on the mailbag episode. I wasn't totally on the side that Ragabi reintegrated Irving because I didn't really understand the timeline, but I think it makes perfect sense if she did reintegrate Irving after they got fired for a little bit after the whole
Right.
innies were outside, because it does make perfect sense. They were not employed by Lumen for a while. He could have came back afterwards and could have been reintegrated exactly since he's come back. And there was a lot of hints this episode. You were totally right. He cursed a lot. He seemed more aggressive sometimes than others. And
Let's
at
eat
at
that.
the yeah,
Yeah.
that was crazy. I was not expecting that. He was like first one right away. He was like, "Let's do it. I'm hungry."
Yeah.
And then I will say, just to jump forward, I don't know if we want to talk about it now or at the very end. The last thing we see is Milchek basically killing Innie Irving by saying like, "We're done." And Irving closes his eyes so we can't see them dilate. We do see the zoom in, but we never hear the ding either. And that
You're right.
was a huge thing that gives it away. And that directly goes to the when Helena turned into Innie Helly as well. We do hear the ding there. So that being said, Irving could have been acting this whole time. And if he's reintegrated, he knows exactly what Innie Irving
Yeah.
knows, so he can play both parts.
I like it.
And before we get into the actual sequential part of the episode, let's talk about two things. And first, I want to go to your thoughts with Irving Luke with the reintegration. I think he's reintegrated, right? And I think something that we might have to find out in this season is that reintegration isn't going to just be snap, you're reintegrated, right? There's going to be some kind of nuance to it. Could it be that it's a slow process and you have to keep going up and down into the severed floor and out of the severed floor to keep yourself healthy, like Ragabi said, and what PD didn't do? But also, it just takes time for the two sides to actually merge enough where you understand what's going on. And that would make more sense with the Mark stuff, because the most jarring part of this episode is that we have Mark at the end of episode 3 go boom, he's reintegrated, he's on the table, he's not on the table, and then this episode he's just, oh, I'm quote unquote any Mark and I'm just chilling with the homies, right? But maybe there's a scenario where it's slow, and when you go down to the innie floor, maybe you still do, when you're reintegrated, go become an innie, but it takes time. And maybe Irving has been taking more time to reintegrate, and that's why he's been getting more so like his outie than Mark has so far. And there's only been that one flash of Gemma versus Helly / Helena that Mark had in this episode. But Irv, yes, he cursing, aggressive, but then he has that one weird fetid moped kind of curse that he throws out that seems more like his any version of Irv. So I feel like he is back and forth, and he's a blend of the both of them. The other thing I do want to talk about now, since it's kind of going to affect our thoughts on the sequential part of this episode, is your guys' thoughts on if this is actually them outside or VR, because a couple things that I want to say, and the reason why I want to bring it up is what you just talked about, Paul, with the ding. If you really think about it, here's a couple things that we could talk about, right? Irv just pops up and he's in the snow, right? How do you do that? Why? And I guess they bring his outie to the snow and then wake him up there, if you want to say that. Okay, whatever. There's no footprints around where he wakes up. There's no footprints when Milchick goes to save Dylan, and Mark are calling for him when Helly and Irv are by the pond, and there's no footprints for Milchick. But the biggest thing here for me, and obviously we have the doppelgangers that kind of look like digitally altered, and what are they? They're in the Helly's in the skirt and heels in the snow and all that kind of stuff. But also, here's my big thing. We have the fact that Petey made the map, and in the bottom right corner it says team building area, right? Is that the team building area that you like go there and it's VR? But here's the thing that I want to talk about, okay? And we'll get hugely into this at the end of the episode, but we have this Glasgow block. This Glasgow block, what it's essentially doing, it's one of the things we actually saw. It was foreshadowed in season 1 during the overtime contingency when Dylan is going through the options. And I'll give you guys the other options. I wrote them all down later in the episode. But one of the options is the Glasgow block. And what it's doing is allowing Helena to be Helena, even though she should be Helly. Well, if they're actually outside, it should be the other way around. It should be that the outies are being overtime contingencyed to be able to be the innies, and Helena should just be Helena. If they were in the severed floor in VR, then it would be Helly is down there, and they need the Glasgow block to make it be Helena.
That's pretty convincing, to be honest. Yeah. I mean, especially if you try and realistically talk about those like footprints, you add that part to it too. I wasn't necessarily thinking VR, but I was thinking team building room in Lumen, because we've already seen they can make the goat rooms, right?
Yeah,
Like they can have natural landscapes out there.
100%.
But it could be. It totally could be. I don't have any evidence for or against. I don't know how that would really work, the VR piece of it, but because then they wouldn't even have been worried about Helly getting choked out and stuff because it's VR. You know what I mean? Right. So it's almost more likely that it's probably part of this theory is correct. And I'm very much, it can't just be outside, because how risky is that, especially for somebody as important as Mark? They would they not be mentally freaking out? Like they talk about the sky being like one of the things they want to see the most, and now they're in trees and nature and all this. Like there should be a little bit more of a physical reaction for these innies being in this situation. So I do like the idea of this being a controlled environment. It almost makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I just wanted to bring that up because it's going to affect how we talk the rest of the episode.
The Glasgow block would just work perfectly with. That's why Helly didn't get that second thing when she goes down the elevator. Her outie does, because it's blocked and she can go down there without it being triggered. So it makes perfect sense. And then, the biggest, I would say, indicator is the twins that they were showing us, because they even looked like they were like digitally just stamped in there. And
it's like an AI version. It's like saying, give me an shitty AI version of Helly.
Yeah. And it would have been easier just to dress somebody up that somebody looks like it, because you won't see the details of their face, but they purposely didn't do that from our viewer experience. So it's like, all right, they're leaning into this is digitally altered or implemented there. So totally with
I guess we could just take it from that point when they see the first Mark. You can assume it's a clone, you can assume it's an actor, you can assume it's VR, you can even assume it's animatronic, like the perpetuity wing. There's a lot of options, and we can talk about that if we want. But there's a lot of options of what those truly could be. But this is like their intro into what this is called, and I just want to throw this out there. We get the name of what this expedition is. It's called the Outdoor Retreat Team Building Occurrence. If you mix that up, it's robot. I don't know. I saw that online. I was like, that's pretty cool. Like the acronym could be robot,
Oh,
because these things could be robots straight up,
yeah.
right? Like that's what
Yep.
I'm saying. So anything we want to bring up about Milchick's introduction to this, besides the fact that cinematography sin of, oh my God, what's that sitting on the hill that Mark clearly could have seen that whole time? But
Well, that's the other thing that brings it to being VR, because there are scenes where it does pull back originally and there's no TV.
yeah,
And then
so
all of a
something
sudden they
weird
turn to the
there.
right and then there's the TV. So
No
again,
plug either. Like, where's the
yeah.
electricity people are saying? So, I mean, yeah, that's support of your theory.
Yeah. That TV was so funny. They just kind of had like the Kier theme song going, playing like elevator music, and just the way they like described it. Like Milchick's talking and he's like, "It's waiting for you in Scissor Cave," and then the music is like dun dun dun, and it just like gets
Yeah.
intense. It was just hysterical. It felt like it was written by Rickon, just because
Mhm.
it's so bad that like the innies are like reacting to it though like it's the craziest thing because that's all they know. So, and
Put a pin in
real
that, bro.
quick,
I like that.
yeah, put a pin. And then you were talking about Irving's old school curse. I wrote that down because it was so funny. He's talking about Milchick and saying, "I wouldn't trust anything out of that mountebank's mouth, not even televisually." It's just like so good. He's so
Also, it's
money.
so funny when Milchick like pauses. They're like, "Who's Dieter?" He's like, "Who's Dieter?" You asked, and he just like goes into the
Yeah.
explanation.
Yeah.
It reminds me of How I Met Your Mother when Barney's like, "That suit," and Ted's on the phone. He's like, "Oh, I'm not there yet." And he's like, "Okay, just let me
Yeah.
know when you are." And then he opens the door. He's like,
That's
"Oh, that one,
it.
that suit." Yeah, there you
Yeah.
go.
We could take it to Scissors Cave if we want. I basically want to just talk about everything up until the campsite night part of it. So like, because we get the first reading. Did we get the first reading at this point? Like we
You
get the
get it. You
kind
get the
they open
appendix
the
in the
book.
cave.
So this is where all the theories spawn about who Dieter actually was, because this is the first time he was mentioned. Some people are saying it's a metaphor. Some people saying it's a real person. It seems like the theory you gave off the rip, Jimmy, which could be, in my opinion, like the best answer is Mark potentially an Eagan offshoot of the brother. But I also can see the whole stand-in for this being a metaphor of Severance, like he was two people in one
Yep. Yep.
brain
Yep.
type of thing here. So you kind of have to read between the lines and take your own opinion. It could be both. And then we can also throw in if you have any comments about the dead crocodile or seal or whatever the hell that was.
I just that was my biggest thing was what the hell is that? Did they try to put that in there just to be like, oh, you saw wildlife when you were out there, but without actually putting them in danger of being around a real
Maybe.
animal, or was it just to like basically show them this is what death looks like, which is what they inferred? I was so confused.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it looks obviously either dead for a long time or like experimented on or like
Or
something's wrong
completely
with it.
fake. Like it was
Yeah, or
weird.
completely fake. So if we're going with what you were saying, Luke, with it being an occurrence where it's just um not VR, it's actually happening kind of like the goats. Could it be that seals are being experimented on like goats are and they throw them there? But why would he throw
Mm.
it there? It's very weird, but I think the main thing for me was that it just showed more of Audi Irv coming out in any Irv where he's fully like, we need to survive. We are in the outdoors right now. We're cold, we're hungry. Let's eat that thing.
Yeah. So good. And then Milchek comes and explains the first piece of it. That's when he starts his lying about the waterfall and everything. And then
Yeah.
he guides them to the campsite. And this is where a lot of good, interesting conversation pieces happen. But anything before we can bring in Miss Wong and like the blue tents scene.
Well, we do talk about like the appendix does start getting read in Scissor Cave, and they do start walking it as they're walking. He's reading. So, do you want to talk about that really quick? Just
Yeah,
to
this guy
yeah.
jerked off on a tree.
So
so,
weird.
so
So
what
weird.
I want to quickly talk about is what Paul said, and that is, it seems like Rickon wrote that story that was coming out of the mouth of Milchick on the TV. Well, it also seems like if you're reading the actual words on the appendix, you can pause it and start reading it. It kind of reads like a Rickon piece of work, especially I
Mm,
did go into the book, the ebook, and started reading some of it. I didn't read the whole thing, but I was just reading some of it because it's very interesting, obviously. And it seems like the way Rickon writes, seems like it could be Rickon. Now, could they be hiring him to write that? And we already know they're trying to luminize the version of his book, but I'm not saying Rickon's bad and working for Lumen and realizing he's doing something bad, but could it be that they asked him to write some kind of story? I don't know. Maybe that is a cool Easter egg.
Came right after the Natalie conversation, so it makes sense. That's good
Yeah.
timing. And the drop of the book in real life, that could be such a here's a hint from the writers, and I love that if that ends up
Yeah.
being the answer. I didn't even think about Rickon being involved.
Yeah.
I initially took that Natalie scene as Lumen's just trying to get close to Mark and find out what they know and what his family knows. Because you could say, Rickon, we're gonna take your writing and give it to the innies and they're gonna love it. But Rickon would never be able to see evidence of it being in use.
Right.
Yeah.
Or
Because
love.
it's just it's innie stuff. Like they're
Yep.
never gonna show that outside. But now I'm thinking they might have actually used Rickon to write this because of that whole discussion. And it's just it plays out perfectly too. And it's tries to be so deep, but it's
Yeah.
almost nonsense. And
That's
that's
why it's
Rickon's thing.
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And
why
that's
it's awesome. It's Rickon. But and the last thing I'll say about this appendix is if you want to say that it's actually an Egan piece of work or a Kier piece of work, that brings more to what I was saying last episode about the board being an AI version of Kier, or I think that might have been in the midweek mailbag. But say for now, the board isn't actually the flame for our 100 fans. The board isn't actually the Lumen CEO's conscious in the chip that's now in Jamie Egan's head. It could be that the board is an AI version of all the work that has been written, created, etc., by either Kier or all the Lumen CEOs all into one, and they're believing that that's the next best thing if they can't have Kier be alive. To me, if that book is actually Kier work, it seems like they have plenty of material, even though this is kind of obviously funny and bullshit, but there's obviously other work that he did that they could turn into an AI if they wanted to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, we ready to move on a little bit? Get to
Yeah.
the night part of this episode where our characters all show up. Miss Wong is cooking the meat, whatever. Milchek's giving all the perks. We got toilet paper. We got this, all this bullshit that they're just selling us. Which I guess are like the marshmallows. Paul, this goes back to what you've said in the past about the food. Marshmallows would be like a huge perk
Oh,
if
yeah.
these are all true, like specifically for Dylan and stuff, because he loves all the food that they give him. So that's all happening here. And then we have Milchek's retelling of chapter 1. We can continue talking about it, but now I'm so convinced that this is Rickon. Like I can't believe that didn't come across my thoughts here, but I'm convinced now. So this is potentially just that.
And let me just say one more thing about that. When he gets into what the next chapter could be, it's something about like, what is it? The nanny stole the baby or something, or who stole their baby? Nanny
Yeah.
stole baby.
That is
Yeah.
so funny. Oh my god, that's
That's it.
exactly what the fuck
Yeah.
it is. And I was
Wow.
thinking too, I was like, because they called it Scissor Cave, and I'm like, what? Did he just look down at his desk and he saw scissors and he was like, oh, that's good, Scissor Cave. But I was like thinking that as a joke, but now that might fucking be exactly it. He's literally just looking around at his life and writing shit down in Kiers. That is so funny.
Innies wouldn't know the difference. I mean, they obviously know that it's ridiculous and funny when they're making all this imagery and symbolism to stuff, and it's also, we'll talk about Helly's reaction or such slash
That's
Helena's reaction. Yeah.
exactly what I wanted to bring up, because on rewatch, even almost felt like this scene was worse because why? Why does she react that way? She knows the risk. She's already on thin ice because Irving at this point has already brought up the gardener again. Everybody has their eyes on them. I'm sure there's a specific reason that the Lumen board put them into the scenario. Like, why would you break character in such a way that Milchek gives them a direct punishment because of what Helly just did here?
Yeah.
I can't convince myself how this is good writing, but maybe this is part of the plan. I don't really know, because this scene really bothered me on the rewatch.
So I was thinking the same exact thing. I'm like, there's no way Milchek wanted Audi Helly to pretend to like be like that and talk shit on the work. Like, there's no way
Yeah.
they planned that. And the only thing I could come up with was Helly was actually like hiking and walking, and this is like the end of the day now. It's nighttime. I think she could have gotten so exhausted from doing all that, that she just breaks character and can't act like any Helly anymore. Because she's like so tired from everything that she can't
Delirious
help.
and
Yeah,
screw
she's
it
so
kind of.
delirious that she can't help but laugh at this nonsense after everything and the long days that she's been through, and she just slipped. So that's the only thing I can come up with, though.
I think there could be a double meaning to it. Meaning, first is technically, I would say Helly would do that.
Yes,
So
I thought that
That's
too.
Helena
true.
doing that is her acting how Helly would act. Like we know how rebellious Helly R actually was. So technically, I would say Helena wasn't being off on how she acted, even though it got the bad reaction out of Milchick, whether that's acting or not.
That's
The
the
other,
part that bothered me. Is
right,
like,
right.
yeah.
It's undermining everything Milchick is saying when he's trying to
Yes.
give them right, exactly. Now, that's points for her to act like Helly, but it's points against if they're trying to like teach them something,
If
right?
there's a reason that they're here, yeah. Yeah.
Right. So then the other thing is we've talked about this a million times, right? You're Kier, you're the Eagans, you guys have this God complex. You think that you're the best thing that ever happened to this world, right? Helena knows, it seems like her character does know that this is all like bullshit, right? You're just chosen to be an Egan, and you just so happen to be the next CEO of the next heir to this dynasty, right? You're
Mhm.
not special. It just so happened that you created this company that made you very wealthy and made you very powerful in this world, right? So she could be like saying, like laughing, like this is bullshit. Like all she might not believe in all of this like God scripture stuff that they always throw. And she doesn't always have to listen to it firsthand. But now that she's being any Helly, she's hearing it and she's like, this is freaking ridiculous, man.
Yeah, the Milchek part of it bothered me, I guess, when you lay it out like that. Because you're right, that is a valid reaction, but I guess I was coupling it in my mind. But maybe maybe that was part of the plan. Who knows?
Yeah.
Yeah. But any other thing before they split, because then we have Helly being cruel for the first time to Irving, calling Bird out. And then I think that's pretty much it. Bird ends up storming off with the Jesus, the
Torch.
The torch.
torch.
Dude,
Yeah.
that's awesome. Remember when I couldn't think of Torch Storm from all those?
You're so right.
Dude, there's like 6 episodes of From where I'm like, that thing, that
Yeah.
freaking
Fire
thing, and
stick.
you guys are like Torch.
Yeah. Also, I saw some people pointing this out, so I'll just throw it out there that Milchek, when they initially get there, gives the torch to Mark because he's like the torchbearer, the leader of the group. So that's just a symbolism thing. But yeah, so Irving takes it. He's like, "Fuck you guys," and goes out again, cursing. And then this is also after the second time he called Helly out on the gardener. I think the second of 3 times this episode. Either way, they split, and then we can take the split scenes in a second. But is there anything else you guys want to point out as Milchek gets super mad and everything?
Were you guys getting any inclination of it being Audi Mark on the inside? Just like the way that he would like completely laugh, and um I was getting like it was mostly any Mark, but then I couldn't tell if it was just because I just watched Mark get reintegrated the episode before, or if he
But
was just opening up and this is a different area, like we're used to seeing him in the office, he might be acting completely different when he's out in the snow or anything like that.
I think that Audi Mark would be less likely to laugh. I think it was more about any Mark just being in love with Helly, like Irving was kind of saying it the whole time, where he's like has this jovial mood about him because of her being there, which then he's blinded by. But I don't know, because I would think that Audi Mark would make it more tamed emotions because he's the depressed one, right? So if it was him bleeding in, I would have thought it would have been
Mhm.
a different reaction.
Okay.
Something that we don't get a chance to see, and I really hope that we do. And Luke, you talked about this last episode with, are we going to get flashbacks to Mark being in his first ever, basically being born as an innie and all of that? If you remember, before Helly R shows up and when Innie Mark, is working with Petey, he's like the class clown kind of. The two of them are pranking, making jokes, doing a lot of things like that in the flashbacks. We don't get many of them, and you really don't think about it too often because soon as Petey's gone and we're watching Mark, he's very like, I'm the boss now and I'm kind of going by the book, not like Irv, but still different. And he lets that bleed out sometimes, but it seems like in those flashbacks when he was around Petey, they had the game they played when they went to the perpetuity wing. There was pranks they would play on each other. They'd make jokes all the time. So I do feel like maybe that's any Mark, but he was actually letting go and being more any Mark. But
Yeah.
Gotcha.
I'm not sure. And something I wanted to ask you guys, and maybe this is nothing, and I think it probably is nothing, but what was Miss Wong standing at? Like, what was that thing that she was?
Oh,
Is
shit.
it
So it's
just
like
a
an
cart?
instrument.
It's
It's
an
like
instrument.
yeah.
It's I gotta look it up. I was meant to look it up in the beginning, but it's a hands-free instrument, and they use it for like a lot of like sci-fi sounding music, and it depends on where your hand is. It changes pitch or tone or sound. Like
She's
if you
playing
look
the
it up.
music then?
Yeah, you could
Yeah,
see when it was going like wah 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 wah. Her
Oh,
hand was like going like this, like she was
okay.
adjusting the waves. Yeah, it's
That's
pretty
what I was
cool.
missing. Okay, cool, cool,
theremin.
cool.
That's what it's called. The
Yes,
freaking
I
theremin.
I I thought Paul was gonna bring it up because I know you like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
And
I
and
wanted
one
one at one
last
time.
make our intro with it, Paul, dude. One last thing I do want to bring up is I am fully on your guys' side 100% about the fact that Irv is cursing a lot in this episode, and that would allude to the fact that he's probably Aldi Irving being reintegrated in. But we can't forget, let's burn this mother effer to the ground.
Mhm.
That's a curse that came out of any Irving's mouth at the end of
Oh,
season
that's
1.
true.
So
That's true. Could be a personality shift. You're right.
And
Ok yeah,
the
go ahead.
last thing I'll say about this night scene, when this is regarding whether it's Audi or any Mark, I do think it is any Mark, and this is not a joke. When they first start to have sex, Mark's face and reactions seems like it's his first time. Like it
oh
seems
yeah.
like yeah, like so I would attribute that to being any Mark as well. So
Yeah,
Yeah,
Kathleen texted the group, and you weren't in it at the time, Paul, because I don't know if she was worried that you hadn't watched it yet or not. And actually, I hadn't watched it yet, so I was not reading it at the time. But she was saying it looks like two people losing their V card for the first time. Now, interesting if that's Helena, is it that kind of scenario for her? Which again, it's not a joke because we don't know, right? We don't know the deal. She was very interested in the kiss. It seems like here in general, I know it's majorly for the innies, all of his work, but it seems like they're against any kind of romantic
yeah.
relations. And also, if we're going with certain things, like she's being quote unquote saved for another Egan, which is awful, of course. It's like Game of Thrones stuff to keep the heirs going in the bloodline. Or the one theory that we had brought up, I think it was you, Luke, that said, we hadn't really seen any mothers or fathers. Like, are they just like somehow spawning like pineapples, these heirs? So
Right.
did Helena ever have a need to have any kind of relations with anybody?
And we're just openly talking about this whole scene. This is after the
Yeah.
split, but yeah, I do still like the idea of like Helena's whole thing is she's like emotionally attached to connection because she's getting rejected by that for her family and like the whole idea of Lumen. So if that's really what's going to change here, that like that's interesting. But I need to shout out the moment like when Mark has the flash between Gemma and Helly.
Yeah.
I just love when Severance uses that noise where it's the "dun-dun-dun-dun," like and like
Yep.
this quick.
Yep.
It felt like they didn't do it for the whole episode up to that point. It felt we were so outside of the Severance world that I was happy to be brought back for a second because that just again brought me back to the end of episode 3, like the reintegration of Mark, and I just missed that and I crave that stuff so much more. But I have no other comments about this besides that we already talked about the whole pregnancy thing where I'm pretty convinced until I see otherwise that she is now pregnant.
Yeah, and we definitely don't have to get into this. And of course, the midweek mailbag. If anyone has anything to say, for Discord, benchtowntv.com/Discord, absolutely free. Jump on there and break down this theory with us. Talk about other theories, but you of course have to get into like, is Mark's sister also an Egan? Was he adopted? Was he fostered? What's the
Mm,
deal? Like, but again, everything about this Lumen show, like Lumen being the town, the city, whatever, being controlled by Lumen, we don't know anything.
right.
Literally. We don't know anything about Mark's childhood. He does say he moved at one point. What does he say? Wisconsin or something, but whatever. Like, we don't know. So, there's a lot. That's why we don't need to get into it. But yeah,
what
it's interesting.
Okay, let's hit the other piece of this night after everybody splits, which is, in my opinion, super interesting of Irving's adventure, where in typical TV movie fashion, he trips, he puts out the torch, he can't have, he doesn't have light, kind of worried he's gonna die from cold, right? So he sleeps for the first time, just to point out
Yeah,
there,
ever.
what we're supposed to think. And
Yeah.
same with everybody else, but people are I've been seeing talking about the fact that maybe sleeping is a huge part of the reintegration because innies never get to sleep without
Right.
punishment
Mhm.
of like getting sent to the break room and everything. So that was cool. And within his dream, he kind of has that bleeding over effect between his Audi and his knowledge, and that's how he figures out that Helly is an Egan.
Yep.
And then we also can couple this with the metaphor that is Woe's Hollow, where we see the bride and we also see Bert for a second. So I don't know what to take of the Bert piece besides just like that's like his innermost thoughts, and he's always that's very important to his innie. But it is cool that on the computer itself, if you saw like the letters spelled out Egan,
Yep.
Mhm.
eventually like when they started being letters, but the numbers are like if you put a number to the alphabet, it is Egan, right? Like it's whatever, like
Love
E is
that.
5, the fifth
Yep.
letter. Like those were the numbers that were bouncing around that said Egan until it got translated, and he had the click moment, and then it confirmed to him that Helly was an Egan, and that's why he flipped on her the next morning. But I kind of want to pass
Um,
it to you guys about thought. Okay, it seems like that was news to you, Paul, huh?
so so I had that the first screen in his dream, it had only the numbers 1, 4, 5, and
Mhm.
7 floating around, and I was
Yep.
trying to figure out what that meant, if that was a date or something like that. And then I knew that the next screen, he kind of saw Egan come together on the screen and it spelled it
Right.
out, but I didn't put the two together that is correlation. So that's genius and makes a lot of sense, and I love that. Right? Let me do
Yeah.
that in my head because it's like EA. Yeah, it's
E
like
is 5, finished. Yeah. Two
that's
ones
awesome.
for A's. Yeah, seven's G. So yeah.
Yeah. And
Genius.
I think the biggest thing about sleep being illegal is the fact that, say you're an innie and you fall asleep and you dream. I'm sure Lumen thinks and maybe confirms that they can't control what the innie dreams, and it could be bleeding from their outie world. Now, not saying every single outie is trying to leave a message for their innie, but if you're an innie and you fall asleep and you start seeing things that your outie knows about, it'll make you question things, and then you're starting to get rebellious and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff, right? My question to you guys is, if Irv is reintegrated or not, do you think that his next step, his next message was to let any Irv know that Helly is Helena, and that was the next message that was supposed to be received? Because my question would have been like, why didn't he see the ooze in the hallway? Is it because he already figured that out? Or is it
Had that
because
revelation. Yeah, I think so.
is
Yeah.
it because Irv went on to the next message, and the next message is Helena is Helly. I need you to know.
I don't even know if there was intent specifically from Audi Irving, but even if it wasn't intentional that he was trying to say that this is an Egan, Audi Irving would know about the Egans. So if that's something any Irving's thinking about and he falls asleep, like why would his mind cross over not access that information? So does it even matter? Like you're
No,
saying you want to know if Audi Irving was specifically trying to say Egan, like she's an Egan. How would he know that though? Like how would Audi Irving know that Helena was in there to even give that message besides it just being peripheral knowledge that Audi Irving
like,
had?
I mean, if Irving is fully in a rebellion and he knows about the inside workings of Lumen, has all the severed employees' names written down, he's working with Ragabi, maybe we still, even though they quieted it and they still had to do damage control. So that means that Helly coming out and saying, I am Helly R, I'm not Helena, and they're torturing us, like that came out. So I would think that Irv would know that. So
That's true. Yeah.
does Irv know that they directly work together? Maybe Ragabi could tell him that. I'm not sure. But I guess my biggest question may not be, is Irv giving the message? It's, why didn't he see the ooze that he was always seeing in season one? And is it just easy enough as I answered the question? So that's it.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think the ooze was before the specific reintegration process happened anyway. So that was just
True.
the
Yep.
bleeding over of the coffee and everything. And now
And
that we're
again,
deeper
we're
into the
assuming
process,
he's reintegrated, but we don't know yet.
well, even if he's
Yeah.
not reintegrated, he's Irving himself. I guess this is also an assumption. Like we've been saying that even if he's not Ragabi reintegrated officially, he's been trying to do it himself with the staying up all night and being obsessive. So I just think that it also could have just been peripheral knowledge that was relevant to any Irving's current situation, and that could have been enough.
Yeah.
I mean, Audi Irving had all of the Lumen employees' names and addresses, so there's a chance he knew that Helly looked Helly up and was like, "That doesn't make sense," and put it together, and then
It's true.
just give
Yeah.
the message. So
But he couldn't
there's
have banked on him falling asleep and dreaming about it. It's the thing.
Well, that's what he's trying to do. He's staying up all night hoping that his innie will fall asleep because he must know that dreams are how you can send messages, or at least hope that your
Mhm.
subconscious from your outie can get to your innie. He definitely wouldn't know that they're getting ready to go on this outdoor occurrence so that it's
Yeah.
allowed that he could sleep all night. It just so happened to work in his favor, but I think
Yes.
he's just really, really trying to, message received, quote unquote. He's just trying to get any Irv to nod off and get something.
But while we're talking about the sleep, and I know we touched on a little bit, like this was the first time for the innies sleeping ever. I wish they kind of emphasized that more. I know they showed Mark like waking up and being like, "Where the hell am I? This is so weird." Like that was his first
Yeah.
time waking up from sleep. I kind of just wish like we saw Dylan like being so happy about laying down and going to sleep because he got so excited about the sky. And
Hmm.
another joke that probably wasn't even the sky. It was like
Yeah.
if it's inside of Lumen. And I just don't know why Lumen even would do this retreat and risk them sleeping. Like I think you were touching on it, Jimmy. They probably don't know how detrimental like dreaming could be for the innies realizations and stuff like that. But it just seems like such a risk that they would do it in the first place. I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll get the answer, but yeah, there's got to be a reason they did this.
My question, I guess, for you, since we haven't even touched on the bride or anything of the woe part of this, are we going to get the origin story for the other three temperaments? Or is this just a one-off where we get to see Woe's Hollow? Like, is there going to be a Frolic and Malice episode? Like, are we going to get to see that? I always forget the
Well,
fourth
Dread,
one. Woe, Frolic, Malice,
dread.
and Dread. Yes.
Yeah, I can't tell if it's just supposed to be a one-off where they're just telling us a stupid story, or if we're going to get it all. Could they release it like they released the Rickon book, and it's not hugely important to the story, except it'll have some kind of meaning. So who knows? But all I need to know is the appendix was bullshit, and the other
Hmm.
three will be bullshit too. And
Definitely.
seeing her is just like what you were saying about seeing Bert, Luke. I think it's just like symbolism with woe, meaning Irving is hurting because he misses Bert. And Bert is essentially dead to him because they turned him off. And obviously, it's right after Helly/Helena gives the cruel comment. Well, would make sense for that. So I think that it's just all symbolism right there. And what you're saying, Luke, I think that's really all there is to the Bert thing, where he's kind of like shutting the door on him, for lack of a
Yeah.
better term, where he's like, I'm gone now. You're sad about it. You're welling about it.
And if Bert wasn't in that scene where he was crying outside the payphone when he was looking at Irving, I would have thought that this was his only appearance.
Yeah.
Christopher Walken's only appearance. So, because I think he only showed up in the trailer once, maybe twice, but either way, we would have seen both those scenes already. So he could be done, but I don't think so. I think he'll be back because
Nah,
there's
he's back, baby.
too much
He's too big of
importance
an
for that
actor.
earlier scene. Yeah. So, all right, let's take it home on this next day because John Turturro just crushes this
Woo.
everything else from here on out to the point where I literally just gave myself pre-chills just about the talk about the quotes that he gives us, which he just handles business in the best way possible. He's intimidating, he's badass, he's confident in himself, and he just as soon as he finds and tracks down Helly, which people are saying that would have been difficult, but because his military ability kind of kicks in, he has that power. But when he finds her, he a couple things he just says that are awesome. Like when he says, like, who would have the power to send their Audi to the seventh floor, and he's putting everything together. It's amazing. Milchek and everybody shows up, and he just has some cool ass quotes here. And he's just like, "She's a fucking mole," and he's like drowning her in between. And then at the end, when Helly finally cracks and says, "Look, do it, Seth," and he goes, "Yeah, do it, Seth," and he just looks up. It's so freaking good. I just loved everything about his line delivery here. And it was just, even when Milchek comes down and is about to fire him and he walks right up to him and just like, oh man, they're like
Eye
2
to
feet
eye,
apart.
baby.
It was, he's a top 3 character, and you can't convince me otherwise. This episode was Irving's episode. 0% chance he's dead. The confidence was amazing. Just Dylan's apology, like, we should have trusted you the whole time. Like, everything here came together that this fully saved the episode for me. And I don't mean save like it was a bad episode. I just think that this was the best part of it, and it all kind of culminated in a good scene. But I'll pass it back to you guys because, man, this part gets me so hyped.
Oh man, it was so good. It just I had the 2 lines written down, the televisually line by Irving and then the "Yes, do it, Seth" line written
Yeah.
down because they were both delivered so perfectly. And that's basically as soon as Helly said Seth, that was like confirmation in
Yep.
Irving's eyes too. So he's like, "Yeah, I got her. I got her, man." And just it escalated so well. It's so out of place from everything we see the innies do. It's so shocking. This whole episode was so out of place. And it just, the climax to this point was so good. And you're freaking out, don't know what's happening. And all of a sudden, you hear the ding while she's underwater. And, that's when Helly's back and just pulls her out. And immediately he's like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I had to do it. And imagine being Helly. She just
Yeah.
last thing she was in the elevator, and all of a sudden she's waking up drowning underground. She's
No.
like, "What?"
No, last thing is she's
No.
on stage being
True,
like,
true.
"Yo."
Exactly.
That's very true. So
Crazy
she was,
ass stuff.
being tackled, basically getting pulled off
I,
stage.
I
and then
saw
drowned.
somebody stitch together the video of it, like her perspective, and it's just, her getting tackled, and then just it skips right to this episode. It would be so jarring. I don't
Oh
even know
my
how she's gonna
gosh.
react next episode.
And Milchick screaming at Irving, and she's just like, basically, this is like a funeral for Innie Irv, and she's just freaking out. Like I think it was just insanely done.
Milchick knows that he has an Egan that he's supposed to be watching over, and he almost
Yeah.
let her maybe die, depending on what we believe is actually going on in this episode, whether they're actually outdoors, whether it's VR, or whether it's a scenario that's within the lumen floors, which is what I think as well, Luke and Paul. But let's talk about something really quickly. First thing is very, very quick. Milchick was very high up on that cliff, and then he just showed up to Irving pretty quickly when he need. I know that like he runs, but like pretty long run, unless they're just quickly getting us where we need to get for the sake of television. But that's just a very small point. But now we have a scenario where Irv could already be reintegrated. That's what we're assuming right now. What happens when someone who's reintegrated has their innie shut off, right? Irv could be in trouble now because he can't go back down to the floor. He could start having a PD scenario where he's fired, and technically it's not a huge deal that he's fired, except for the fact that now he can't be going up and down to help the reintegration sickness and the reintegration process, like Ragabi said. So starting in episode 5, if we start seeing Audi Irving, nosebleeds, getting sick, we might start having that. We don't know how long exactly Irving's been reintegrated, but if we know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe they said in season 1, PD was actually reintegrated and working downstairs for a couple weeks before he thought it got fishy and he decided to leave and stop going down to the lumen floor. So it's definitely not been 2 weeks for Irving since he's been reintegrated. So my thoughts are that it's going to be a problem that he can't go back down, and there's going to have to be a way to help him.
Oh, is he not making it out of the season? Is that what you just said?
No, I don't know. I don't like that at all. I don't like that one bit,
either.
dude. You just put him in your top 3 and they're going to kill him, bro? No.
So you're saying that what Milchick told the control room to do or whatever was to just destroy Innie Irving, just his whole being?
So they're saying they basically do like he's saying memory wipe. You guys won't remember him. He won't remember you. Blah blah blah. Like, I think it shouldn't matter hugely because he's already reintegrated, and maybe that's okay. But what I'm saying is that he needs to be able to go down to that floor, and he's fired.
Yeah.
So
okay,
he can't keep up with the reintegration sickness basically protocol.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Ragabi did say she was getting better, and PD was only having that thing. So that might not be a thing. In my head, I just had Irving nothing was going to happen after Milchek said now. I feel like that's what I think is going to happen. Like Irving's just going to pretend like all of a sudden he's outie. And in that sense, he would be able to like go up and down. I mean, not that he's ever going to be invited into Lumen again, but like,
well, that's it. He's fired. That's what I'm saying. He's not allowed by Lumen to go down. But I fully 100% agree with you, Paul. I do think that Milchek doing what he's doing, the severed firing, I think Irving's just gonna be like, no big deal, bro. Like
he's like, all right, get in character.
Yeah, scene.
Just to, to reiterate why we think that when he closed his eyes at the very end, we didn't see his eyes dilate and we didn't hear the ding. We know that they give those cues all the time or don't give them on purpose. So just more evidence.
That's all I got written for the episode. Do we have any other parting thoughts before we get out of here? I know that was a little bit of a quicker one, but it kind of felt like it deserved to be a little bit of a quicker one based on.
And it honestly wasn't that quick. It was an hour still. So
they didn't have the title sequence for this episode. I didn't know if that was just to give us full screen time or just not bring us out of it. But my only question for you guys is, and it should be quick too, why was it called like an outdoor retreat team building occurrence? Like, were they trying to like, we need it to fit Ortbo and we're just going to throw words in there? Or was it Ortbo just popped out and it is what it is? It seems like they were trying to get like
robot acronym.
I like that too. When you said that, I was definitely on board. I'm like, that's something.
Yeah, I think it's the latter. I think it just is what it is. That's what they call it. Just like they call anything else, and they just went with. But I do think that. Did I say the latter? No, the latter was the second one you said, Paul, right?
Oh, I thought you were saying because I was saying the robot piece.
No. I was saying the latter of Paul's two choices.
Gotcha.
So, but I agree with yours too, Luke and Paul, with the robot thing. I think the writers probably were like, "Oh, that's pretty cool," and went with it. The writers probably did it on purpose. The Lumen people probably don't give a shit.
Yeah.
I think that there's still more to talk about, and we'll wait till the midweek mailbag when it comes to the Helena/Helly stuff and what she said in the actual tent. Where was she just fully acting? What is there to why she went for the relations with Mark? Is it just keeping up with character? Was she wanting romantic relations? We kind of already talked about all that, but I do think that there's going to be a lot to talk about once we get into the midweek mailbag with the Discord members. So guys, benchtowntv.com/Discord for the 1,000th time. The link will also be in the description. Let us know what you think when it comes to all that. I think this also is kind of confirming for us that this is a slow reintegration process. I think that they really are confirming with us that Mark S. somehow was Mark. He got reintegrated. Maybe he talks to Ragabi. She says, you have to go back to work. When you go back to work, you do get turned into your innie. And there is some kind of nuance where, yes, you're reintegrated, but it is a slow process and your outie is going to be more reintegrated, quote unquote, than your innie is. And you just have to let it happen. We know that PD was saying that relativity is all off. We talked about this last episode where, his first day in Lumen feels like it could be yesterday to the outie, even though it was however long ago, years ago, etc., depending on who the person is. Everything, the relativity is totally off. So, and I know that might be mainly part of the reintegration sickness, but episode 4 out of 10, we're going to get the answers. I think we were expecting some more answers. I think we were expecting holy shit, Ragabi, what just happened? And Ragabi would be like, so this is what just happened.
Yeah.
100%. I think that's what we were expecting, and we didn't get it. So we're like, oh. But I still think it was obviously a great episode. Had a blast talking with you guys. Any final parting shots before we move on to the midweek mailbag for next episode?
Approaching the halfway point, guys, and there's so much TV left in this season. I cannot wait.
There really, really is. Anything, Paul?
What if we see a bunch of seals in Audi Irving's fridge, and that's why he had the urge to
he just eats seals.
Yeah.
That'd be hilarious.
So, that's my parting shot.
That's your parting shot. I love it. All right, guys, if you like what you heard, hit that subscribe button on the Core Podcast and join our Discord and talk to us. But also, guys, we know that a lot of you have been commenting on our Spotify. That is a new feature. Each episode, you can comment on the actual episode with theories, thoughts, etc. So you can join the Discord or comment on our Spotify episodes, and we'll use that for the midweek mailbag too. So if you don't have Discord, if you rather not use Discord, however it is, comment on our Spotify, and we'll definitely use that for the midweek mailbag. We have had some good comments there, and because it's a new feature, we were neglecting it a little bit just because we didn't even realize it existed. Now we know it exists, so we're in, guys. So let us know. Otherwise, we are the Core Podcast. Midweek mailbag will be in a few days. We can't wait for the next episode. We're almost halfway there. Thank you so much for listening.
Is that a new mic stand?